want benign indifference. They want us drugged. We could be pets. We could be food. But all we really are is livestock.
I've got one that can see.
We become slaves the moment we hand the keys to the definition of reality entirely over to someone else. Whether it is a business, an economic theory, a political party, the White House, News World, or CNN. Hello, welcome to Awake in the Age of Revealing. This is Doug Michael. It's February 24th, 2014 at the time of this recording. The beginning quote was from B.W. Powell. Sets the stage for what we're going to talk about today. The title of this segment is called Stepping Away from the Control Paradigm. As we teeter on the brink of complete societal, environmental, economic, and cultural breakdown, it seems as if the majority simply goes deeper into the trance, willfully ignoring that which moves all around them. Embracing every distraction imaginable, so many cling on to the greatest illusions, believing in wholesale lies and outright absurdities, and have actually convinced themselves that all is well, that everything is just fine, and that there is some kind of future within this system of imbalance, injustice, narcissism, and complete breakdown. A collective insanity grips humanity like an insatiable consciousness parasite, spreading and growing as the world falls dead and the masses embrace, even celebrate, abject ignorance. They cheer for their own enslavement and throw flowers at the oppressors. Tyranny and subjugation multiply in direct correlation to the collective ignorance a society operates within. Where ignorance abounds, freedom cannot exist. As Thomas Jefferson said it, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. We have reached the point where if humanity does not collectively remove their heads from their asses, the jackboot will come stomping down upon the face of humanity without mercy. Now this may sound like fear-mongering, but it's nothing of the sort. It is simply where we are, and the stubborn refusal to acknowledge the situation as it is will only bring more misery, suffering, and enslavement. Embracing ignorance over truth in any situation is always a recipe for destruction. I came across this quote by Ingrid Holtby that sums it up. She said, "Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is impotence. It is fear. It is cruelty. It is all the things that make for unhappiness." From my perspective, one thing that proves that statement is the unprecedented rise in the use of antipsychotic, psychotropic, and SSRI antidepressant drugs. These horrible poisons literally destroy the very humanity of those that willingly ingest such garbage by destroying the neurons in the frontal lobes of the brain that deal with emotion, and by interrupting the synapses in the brain. They permanently alter the physiology of the brain. The chemical lobotomy that ultimately results from the use of such drugs is turning out droves of smiling depressives, completely detached and dissociated from their own selves. We are emotional beings, so destroying the part of the brain that deals with emotion is to numb and kill such an important aspect of what makes us human. It is self-murder. The online forums are filled with endless testimonies of people who have spoken out and shared their stories about how these drugs have destroyed their lives. I've read several in which people claim that they cannot feel love in the same capacity anymore. There is an agenda here. It is a war on consciousness and a full-on assault against our very humanity. I've personally witnessed people transform from taking these poisons for a length of time. I've watched them become what I call empty vessels. In 1961, member of the Fabian Society, Aldous Huxley, foreshadowed what was approaching when he wrote, "There will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it, because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods, and this seems to be the final revolution." 21% of Americans are currently prescribed SSRI drugs, and sales of antidepressant and psychotropic drugs rake in an astounding $27 billion annually. Now, the burden of embracing all aspects of the self, which includes the darker aspects, of course, it's just far too much to bear for so many that they will numb away the very warning signs that arise from undealt with repression and the anxiety that arises from the unconscious commitment to live an inauthentic life. True anxiety arises as a red flag, a warning signal to remind us that we are not living a life that is true to oneself. The commitment to live a lie causes all kinds of red flags and warning signs to arise, such as depression, anxiety, etc. Hence, this embracing of the murder of the self. I know one person who would even joke as she ingested her antidepressant medicine. "Gotta take my happy pill," she would say. I have watched this person become an empty shell. Her emotions appear to be a mimicry rather than genuine feelings. Now, I would suggest that if you need a mind-destroying pill to feel happiness, that you have some severe emotional and existential problems, not so much medical ones. Humanity is completely dissociated, that is to say, inwardly split and divided. We are born into a system that feeds this split, manufactured division, and we're conditioned into the control paradigm from the moment we begin to learn and develop. It begins with conditioning into the familial structure as parents indoctrinate their children into their beliefs and ideas about reality. Then the kids are sent through the 12-step brainwashing indoctrination that we bravely call education. The ones that stand out or do not fit in are hammered back into place, often through the drugging of the young with such horrors as Ritalin, which does roughly the same kind of damage that SSRI drugs do. Ritalin is a highly addictive Schedule II stimulant. Now, the education system as it stands creates a hyper-left-brained cognition where free thinking is shunned and creative expression is muted. It turns out generation after generation of indoctrinated robots who have had their critical thinking abilities severely diminished, if not shut down altogether. It's slave training. And if that sounds harsh or conspiratorial, just look into the Common Core curriculum guidelines that are now in place in the schools. The entire system is designed to turn your kids into little worker bees that can't think and will not question their servitude. Just a cursory observation of the youth of today will attest to this. They're a lost generation, enthralled and distracted with technology. Now, my generation, the X generation, is no better. I observe droves of infantile adults that appear to be simply kids with bigger diapers. So few have the ability to critical think anymore, and their minds are programmed mostly by what they think they know, or whatever horse shit and drivel gets spewed from the television. They're TV educated. This is a generation of mindless consumer drones obsessed with celebrity and pop culture, who have long ago conceded their right to think for themselves to the control paradigm, and trying to get them to open their minds to any new idea is like shoveling shit against a tidal wave. They celebrate their willfully embraced ignorance and shun or ridicule the few that do question or that haven't lost their ability to think critically. Now, what kind of children will a generation of non-thinking, dumbed down, drugged out, dissociated, spiritually dead, emotionally deranged automatons turn out? Well, the generation of lost souls that are coming up now. When you give your mind away to this control structure, this is what happens. And you somehow believe that our kids will inherit some kind of utopian society? Now, that's assuming that they even give a shit at all about what kind of world we're leaving to our children. Most do not. Care and compassion have been effectively programmed or drugged out of the mass consciousness, and a culture of complete narcissism and selfish egoic me-ism has arisen. This ego-centered culture is so out of balance and accord with natural law that it will fall, and we have a front row seat. To actually believe that it can go on much longer as it is right now is a complete delusion. Then, of course, there's the apathetic mindset. Many are intelligent enough to understand that the state of the country and the world is in shambles. They just don't give a flying fuck. As long as they have theirs, why should they care? Now, people like that are extremely delusional because they've bought into the false notion that somehow they will not be affected. They have bought into the illusion of separation and cannot even remotely begin to comprehend that when one human being suffers, we all suffer. They are devoid of any understanding of their connection to nature, to the divine, and to one another. They are selfish and self-centered, existing on the periphery and completely enslaved by the unhealthy, overinflated ego. The fact that we are on the cusp of the complete collapse of this system need not be a message of fear, for it can be looked at as a great opportunity for humanity. This paradigm is so corrupted and so completely out of harmony that it needs to come down if humanity is to even hope to rise from the ashes and to build something new that works. Now, a paradigm is a model or template. We can define it as a collective worldview. The current paradigm is one of control and subjugation in which true freedom is spat upon and erroneous and completely disempowering belief systems, ideologies, and falsehoods are embraced, celebrated, and vehemently defended. Perhaps one of the most destructive false beliefs that is so willingly embraced is the absolutely erroneous belief in authority. Now, the word authority derives from the Latin word auctoritatem, which means command, and from the Latin auctor, which means master or author. So, a belief in outside authority is a belief that some external master is the commander or author of your life. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but in my life, I am the author. I reject any and all outside authority, be it in the form of a god, a guru, a government, an academic expert, a law enforcer, a so-called lover, or any other external influence. This belief in authority has caused untold human misery for thousands of years. Now, this can be summed up brilliantly in this quote from the teacher Michael Tsarian. He said, "As soon as I hear that someone is thinking that another authority, another person, has the rights over their mental, emotional, attitudinal, and psychic life, I'm worried about that person, because I know that that person has some very serious psychological and existential problems right off the bat. Then that person is going to be a part of a herd, or will be a controller of a herd, or be manipulated by the herd, or whatever you want to call it. But you will never find that person doing any good in the world." We're trained and conditioned at every turn to externalize, to look without instead of looking within, and when the naturally occurring anxiety and depression arises from not being in alignment with the self, we seek to suppress it or even drug it out of existence. Thus, a society, indeed a planet of broken beings, existing on the outskirts of their own being and selfhood, is made manifest, and it is leading humanity down a very dark and dangerous road. The control paradigm wants a collectivized herd, and that's exactly what exists. The entire New World Order system of control is one built upon the ashes of selfhood and individuality. When a person makes the conscious effort to stand apart from the crowd and be an individual, the collectivized herd ruthlessly attacks that individual and seeks to pull them back into line like crabs in a bucket. When an individual does not waver, they are outcasted, ridiculed, and scorned without mercy, simply for not conforming. As the author David Icke so rightly puts it, we police one another. And certainly, we've forgotten how to celebrate uniqueness, and instead, so many of us seek to fit into the crowd in one way or another. Now, this collectivized mentality will never lead to freedom because the two can never coexist. Walking alone on the road of selfhood is rejected because it is just far easier to go along to get along, to follow, to conform, and to not think. I've noticed in my personal life that when you refuse to conform to norms or status quo thinking and speak and stand in your truth, especially those who claim to love you, reject you and try to pull you back into the sheep pen. It's astounding. But the man or woman who thinks for themselves is an enormous threat. And I put it this way. The greatest threat to the establishment today is the person who can think independently and maintains the ability to continuously scrutinize what they think they know. The challenger of conventional thought, the critical thinker, the man or woman of ideas is the enemy, the one who walks alone. She will not join. She will not conform. She will not waver. She has detached from the herd. The free thinker is perceived as the dangerous one. His ideas are a danger to the system, to his peers, and to the rigid confines of ego-centered consciousness. He is a rebel in the truest sense. He is the sane amongst the unsane, the one whose guidance comes only from within. Think for yourself and watch the lie become dust beneath your feet. Think for oneself, right? What a rarity in this circus carnival of insanity we call culture. Most would rather die than ever think for themselves. It's just astounding to me that people wish to remain within collectivized ignorance and still imagine themselves to be free. The massive over-identification with ego consciousness, which is propped up and encouraged at every turn, only solidifies the illusion of separation, and from that illusion will manifest a dystopian global prison of our own making. Now, never forget that there is an outside influence, but ultimately it's in power because we allow it to be so. We allow evil to flourish by ignoring it, and we permit the vilest and most sadistic psychopaths to rule over us. This willful act of turning a blind eye and choosing ignorance over truth is what is causing and sustaining the mess we find ourselves within. Now again, the teacher Michael Tsarian hit the nail on the head when he stated, "People born in Western countries have no excuse for not knowing the reasons for injustice, cruelty, and human enslavement. If a person doesn't know there is an ongoing conspiracy against freedom, justice, and truth, it's because they don't care to know. Despite their access to libraries, bookstores, television, newspapers, internet, and the best schools, many people simply prefer to exist in a state of cognitive dissonance. They never ask what is going on, and they ridicule the few who do. These people constitute the true enemy." It's a very powerful statement. The only thing I really don't agree with is the part about newspapers and television. Having access to newspapers and TV is really not going to lead you to the truth too much. Those devices are made to control and influence public opinion. But I think the rest of that quote is right on. It's the real enemy are the gormless masses that stand in the way. Right? The ones who refuse to think for themselves, the ones who refuse to stand in selfhood, and the ones who will ridicule you for doing so. That's your enemy. The outer world of manifested reality is a direct projection of the collective consciousness. The control paradigm works primarily through mind control, psychological manipulation, and subconscious conditioning to create the outer world of manifested reality that the controllers want. Since the controllers are incapable of creation and operate at a lower vibratory frequency, you see, psychopaths are devoid of compassion and the creative element, thus are not human in the truest sense. They condition the mass consciousness to create and project the reality that they prefer, which is one of imbalance, disharmony, suffering, greed, chaos, and despair. Completely in contradiction to natural law, but in line with their frequency and their imbalanced consciousness. Author Thomas Sheridan, in his book Anvil of the Psyche, summed it up perfectly like this. He said, "This non-material aspect of our personal identity, consciousness, is a double-edged sword. It has the potential to either create through personal intention or to be manipulated to create what an exterior influence requires of our intention. Our collective intention and energy is manipulated to feed the beast, so to speak. No, he was right on when he said that. Our powers of creation, our intention, our consciousness is manipulated so that collectively we will create the world that more resonates with these psychotic controllers, which look around you. That's what they feel comfortable in. A world of disharmony and imbalance and injustice and just complete disharmony to natural law. The ruling class is psychopathic and completely parasitic, a reflection of the collective consciousness parasite that infects humanity, and in recent times it has slipped out of the shadows and now operates in plain view for all to see, or at least for those who are willing to look. Unfortunately, far too many are either afraid to look or are just unwilling, so instead they live their lives in total denial, in a delusional state of separation, falsely believing that they are free. They are slaves, and until one can admit that to oneself, there is no hope of ever being free at all. Oh yes, they can buy into the illusion of freedom, but that just ensures deeper enslavement and locks the mind up tight within a psychological prison cell. In fact, the control paradigm would not work so comprehensively without the illusion of freedom. And this is precisely where the majority are at right now, and it can only lead to ruin. As the philosopher Vernon Howard stated, he said, "Human sickness is so severe that few can bear to look at it, but those who do will become well." You have been lied to your entire life, and you are a slave. Now it's the truly intelligent person that realizes this. True intelligence is the understanding that you've been sold lie upon lie upon lie. Now how does the ego react to hearing that truth? Well, it kicks, it screams, and it fights with all of its strength to reject that painful reality. The ego has defense mechanisms and doesn't like it when its false delusions are challenged or scrutinized. But this is exactly what must be done on the individual level, and it's hard work, which is why so many would rather embrace slavery or die. Now I observe from a detached perspective, and I'm incredulous as how comprehensively mind-controlled the average person truly is. It's astounding. So few even seem to have the ability to conjure up an original thought, and so few have the courage to stand in their truth and live it, regardless of what other people think. Fear of ridicule is another major brick in the wall of psychological imprisonment, and so is the incessant need for approval from others. Now those who conform usually seem to insist that others conform also, and the brave few who refuse to conform are attacked without mercy by the gormless herd, and history has as well history as well as the present moment is replete with examples of this. All through history, anyone who's ever stood apart from the crowd or tried to warn us of the control paradigm, well, in centuries past, were burned at the stake or tortured, in cruel, inhumane ways. Nowadays, that's still done, but they don't even have to. They could just assassinate your character through their mainstream media. And even in our own circle, like I said earlier, we police each other. That's exactly what happens. You stand apart, and even people close to you who claim to love you will try to pull you back in line. Now, eventually, a servant of truth is no longer affected by this, and I can tell you from personal experience, when you make the commitment to search for and serve the truth, you do not win many friends. In fact, you lose quite a few. People have come and gone in and out of my life, and so many have gone not because they didn't like me as a person, but because of my views. But when you awaken and step outside of the mental and emotional prison cell, you become a threat to those that cannot or will not free their minds from the control paradigm. When you experience a shift in consciousness, you vibrate at a higher rate of frequency, and this is very uncomfortable to those who refuse to expand their awareness. Many people get very angry, even sometimes downright violent, when you upset the apple cart. Now, this following clip from the 1999 film The Matrix spells it out pretty well. Take a listen.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it.
Again, it's very difficult to walk the road of awareness and selfhood. It is a constant effort and a continuous rethinking of your perceptions and beliefs. It is to keep what you think you know under constant scrutiny. See why this is so difficult for most people? It's just far easier to exist within a parameter of beliefs, even if they are extremely limiting. Now, this can be summed up perfectly in this quote by Jack Trout. He said, "The sane person constantly analyzes the world of reality and then changes what's inside his or her head to fit the facts." That's an awful lot of trouble for most people. Besides, how many people want to constantly change their opinions to fit the facts? It's a whole lot easier to change the facts to fit your opinion. We call that information bias. He went on, "Unsane people make up their minds and they find the facts to verify their opinions, or even more commonly, they accept the opinion of the nearest expert and then they don't have to bother about the facts at all." This is the mindset in which the mass majority operates within. They are unsane. Now, interestingly, the word sanity is very close to the word sanitize, so if your mind is sanitized, then it is sane. The ego has worked very hard to build its precious edited belief structures, and when that foundation is threatened, the ego rebels. We edit out the dark side of life, or what we do not wish to acknowledge, including our repressed memories and the things we've been conditioned to fear, or the things we do not like about ourselves. This imbalanced mind state manifests in the outer world and reflects this collective imbalance back to us, even on the individual level in our personal relationships. Now, I think that a good first step to walking away from the control paradigm is to understand what the true function of the ego is and to rediscover your divinity. Remember who you are and understand that you are not the thing you think your thoughts with. In fact, that mechanism is but a tiny aspect of the totality of the psyche, albeit a very persistent and stubborn aspect. It's when we over-identify with the ego that so many problems arise, and we are about to witness the consequences of this as our civilization falls into ruin. It has happened before throughout history, and it's happening now. What is about to occur across this planet will shake it to its core. Now, once it's discovered who and what you truly are, you can begin to work with the ego and negotiate with it. You allow it to function as it is meant to do and to do its job. It believes itself to be the boss, but it's not. It is the falsely enthroned king. Now, stepping away from the control paradigm is to me a massive process of unlearning. It is the shedding of everything that is untrue in order to discover what is true. It's a process of negation and deconstruction. Now, it's very painful at first, letting all of your precious beliefs fall away, but it's necessary and highly rewarding in the long run. If you are engaged in this process, others will become extremely uncomfortable around you, especially if you're vocal about it. Most will just view you as crazy because the person becoming sane appears that way to the unsane. You'll get labeled as a kook, a wacko, a nut job, a conspiracy theorist, or whatever, and that's a good sign that you're on the right track. Now, one of the greatest decisions I made in the beginning was to turn off the fucking television. Now, I'm not saying either way that you should or you shouldn't, but I suggest this experiment. Don't watch any TV for 90 days and instead read nonfiction books for that time. Read stuff that will help you learn things you did not know before. If you really want to expand your perceptions, read books on occult symbolism, and then after the 90 days, watch TV again with more educated eyes and see if you notice any difference. One thing is certain. Within those 3 months, you will have learned things you didn't know before. You will have expanded your knowledge base. And the reason I mentioned books on occult symbolism is because once you have an understanding of these ancient sacred symbols, you begin to see them all over the place. And we'll get to that. I stopped actively watching TV around 1999, the year when I started to kind of wake up. To this day, I very seldom watch any, but when I do, I see it in a whole new way. For example, there's a current TV commercial out right now for Axe hair gel. In the ad, there is blatant Masonic imagery, and it's no coincidence. This is done deliberately. After a while, you begin to see occult symbolism everywhere and realize that it's being used subversively. You see these symbols in advertising, on corporate logos, within the halls of religion and government, literally everywhere. Now, symbols speak to the subconscious mind, and these sacred symbols are denigrated to sell you something and to subliminally program the psyche. Thomas Carlyle spoke about the power of symbols when he stated, "In a symbol there is concealment and yet revelation. Here, therefore, by silence and by speech acting together, comes a double significance. In the symbol proper, what we can call a symbol, there is ever more or less distinctly and directly some embodiment of and revelation of the infinite. The infinite is made to blend itself with the finite, to stand visible, and as it were, attainable there. By symbols accordingly is man guided and commanded, made happy, made wretched." Now, advertising and mass media is loaded with subliminal programming through imagery and symbolism, much of which is sexualized to appeal to the baser instincts and to sell you something you don't need. Now, television is a great medium. It's not TV itself, it's the abject shit that accounts for 99.9% of broadcasting that's the problem. It's how the hidden persuaders are using it that should be understood. The consciousness manipulators are black magicians, dark occultists, or sorcerers, if you like, and it is no exaggeration to refer to them as such. TV is one of the greatest tools of mind control ever invented. You cannot tell me for 1 second that this medium does not have an effect on the mind. Just listen to the average adult conversation, right? Mostly it's just shallow, empty babble, and so few seem to exhibit the ability to engage in intelligent conversation of any depth anymore. The sorcerers have used this medium as a way to dumb down the masses, and it has been extremely effective. Just look at the typical commercial, which seems to be geared towards the lowest level of intelligence, and you'll see just what I mean. Now, once you turn it off, read, and begin to expand your knowledge base, you probably won't want to watch very much of it anymore anyway. Now, straight from the horse's mouth, we can get a better understanding of how TV is used to control. Anton LaVey was the founder and high priest of the Church of Satan. He came right out and stated in his writings the exact purpose of TV. He said, "Many of you have already read my writings identifying TV as the new God. There is a little thing I neglected to mention up until now. Television is the major mainstream infiltration of the new satanic religion. The TV set, or satanic family altar, has grown more elaborate since the early 50s, from the tiny fuzzy screen to huge entertainment centers covering entire walls with several TV monitors. What started as an innocent respite from everyday life has become in itself a replacement for real life for millions, a major religion of the masses." I'm going to repeat that one thing he said in the middle there again, because it's absolutely, he was telling the truth. He said, television is the major mainstream infiltration of the new satanic religion. Absolutely. LeVay went on, he said, there are television sets in every home, every restaurant, every hotel room, every shopping mall. Now they're even small enough to carry in your pocket like electronic rosaries. It is an unquestioned part of everyday life. Kneeling before the cathode ray god with your TV guide concordance in hand, we maintain the illusion of choice by flipping channels, chapters and verses. It doesn't matter what is flashing on the screen. All that's important is that the TV stays on. Now, stepping away from the control paradigm doesn't mean that you have to go live in a cave and be a hermit, living off of the land. To me, it's entering into the observer mode and detaching from all of the noise and the nonsense. It is freeing your mind by the act of reevaluating everything you think you know. This process leads to self-discovery. You can still participate in the system, but you are no longer attached to or identified by it. It's like the Neo character from the movie The Matrix taking the red pill and seeing beneath the veil of false reality. A manufactured counterfeit reality has been superimposed over the true reality, and the collective consciousness is manipulated to create and to sustain it. When you make the commitment to begin the journey, you will find that you are tested along the way. You will be ridiculed, rejected, scorned, even feared, because as I've said, the awakening person is a threat. People tend to think that walking the spiritual path is all love and light, and that you shouldn't look at all that negative stuff, which is of course a pile of crap. Your resolve will be tested and you will lose friends, but if someone doesn't want to be your friend because you are walking the road of selfhood, then they were probably never really your friend in the first place. Now, and just to reiterate that point, many in the New Age movement, which has been completely co-opted and infiltrated by these occult sorcerers, the hidden persuaders, if you like, some of the teachings are just absolutely ridiculous. This whole thing, I've heard this a lot too over the years. Don't focus on the negative, just focus on the positive. Love and light, la-da-da. That is an imbalanced way of thinking. Now, I'm not saying that you should be completely dwelling within the negative, because either way it's imbalanced. It's basically about balancing out the two and having that, balance between the both polarities. To be in the mindset of, love and light and don't look at the negative, that is imbalanced towards the light polarity. And conversely, to be completely stuck with all the negative, seeing no hope, offering no solutions, is to be completely stuck in the dark polarity. Kind of need to blend them both and come up with a balance between the two. If we're, to do this, it's my opinion and my advice. Detaching from the herd and stepping away from the control paradigm takes an enormous amount of courage. And discovering the truth about what's going on in the world is not going to make you feel all warm and fuzzy. First it's going to really piss you off. Eventually it will set you free. Anyone that says that it's going to make you feel all warm and fuzzy is either completely full of shit or they're trying to sell you something. Now, the German poet Bertolt Brecht put it this way. He said, truth is belligerent. Truth, by its very nature, is at war with the forces of falsehood and deceit. Very true, he was right. Now, eventually, secrets are revealed and the flow of information just comes to you. It becomes a journey of self-discovery. And most importantly, don't forget to laugh. Once you see things as they are, you can see the absurdity of it all and have a good laugh. Although the situation is dire, laughing in its face is far better than reacting in fear. You disempower the control paradigm by laughing in its face. The process of awakening will require a lot of reading. Sorry to break that to you. This is something else so few engage in, unless it's some stupid romance novel or other such nonsense, some Oprah-approved bullshit that will do nothing in aiding in the expansion of consciousness. Because let's face it, reading is the basis of how we learn in this five-sense reality. The fact that so few want to be bothered with it reflects in the collective herd and can be readily observed in the droves of misinformed people that makes up the mass majority. If you want to awaken, you're going to have to read a lot, and this means reading material that you may not think you will agree with. It requires taking in information that will challenge what you think you know. However, the process of awakening is not as much about gaining new information as it is about letting go of preconceived ideas and beliefs. Reading information that challenges your beliefs aids in the process of letting go. Make no mistake, the journey towards enlightenment is a destructive process. It is, right, think about that a second. We tend to think of enlightenment as, in terms of luminescence, I see the light, now I'm in the light. Always forgetting, that when the light comes in, the first thing it does is it shines upon all the dirt and the muck and the shit that needs to be cleaned away. Well, enlightenment doesn't really work that way. It's not so much about luminescence as it is, think of it in terms of weight. You're letting go all the crap that has bogged you down. Now you're enlightened. And it is a destructive process. Very much so in the beginning. It's very painful. And I can tell you from my own experience, it's worth it. It's the destruction of everything that is untrue, false ideas and beliefs about reality and the self. And it is a process of negation. Again, you can see why so few will ever bother with this. The hyperinflated ego has them by the throat, and its fragility is threatened by this process. The ensnared ego does not realize that this process is actually freeing to the ego in the long run, nor does it even recognize that it is part of something much, much greater. When you discover your own divinity, you realize that the self wishes to embrace the ego, not obliterate it. It's another New Age teaching. I've heard this a lot too. Kill the ego, get rid of the ego. No. We need it. It serves a very, very necessary function. I put it like this. It kind of acts as an anchor for this reality. Its job is basically to put things in nice little neat boxes and packages, like an efficient stock clerk, if you like. However, the ego's overcompensating. Think of it as a deckhand on a ship. It's a deckhand and it has a necessary job to do, but it's running around thinking it's the captain of the vessel. This causes a lot of problems in the world. We're split. We're disconnected from the source. We're not standing in the light of our divinity, walking around unaware of who and what we are. Well, look around at the world that creates. And it's not the ego's fault. The ego's done a great job. And when the higher self comes in, if you like, it will try to embrace the ego. It will thank it. Job well done. Now, when this process occurs, the ego is free to function as it was meant to. Again, this does not come easy and without considerable effort. You're not going to sit down for 30 minutes in front of some TV show and boom, there you go, instant enlightenment. This is a lifelong, ongoing process. It's continuous scrutiny of what you think you know. We live in an information age, an age where we're bombarded with information. And more new information comes in. You must constantly reevaluate what you think you know. Clinging on to old archaic belief structures just ain't going to do it. The people that refuse to go with that flow and to open their mind are in for a lot of trauma in the days ahead. Because their ego's going to fight and it's going to suffer major breakdown from that unwillingness to initiate this process here. Now, most are locked within the limiting state of consciousness. Most people locked in this limiting state of consciousness where the ego is boss simply prefer distraction over expansion. They are lost little souls, buying into every lie of the control structure, especially the lie that they are separate or that nothing exists outside of the five-sense reality. Now, since the ego is but a tiny aspect of the totality of the psyche, those entrenched within ego-centered consciousness believe that they're small. See, the ego tricks us into believing this lie, and of course it's encouraged by the control system. See, the thing about the term ego, when you say the word ego, it conjures up a lot of negative connotations because most people don't understand the dynamic of the psyche. So when you say the word ego, people instantly think of, oh, the egomaniac type, the one who walks around with his head swollen, who shit don't stink, thinks they're better than everything else. All they do is talk about themselves. And we've all dealt with people like that before. But that's not what I'm talking about. When I talk about the ego, what I'm talking about is basically the mechanism that you think your thoughts with. That constant chatter, that conversation that's always going on. If you're sitting there saying, what conversation is he talking about? Yeah, that one. That's the ego. Now, we've been duped and tricked into believing that that mechanism that we think with is the totality of all that we are. But it's not. It really is just a tiny aspect. It's just that the greater aspect, if you like, is veiled from us because of the ego. And to digress just a bit, something happened in mankind's past where we collectively suffered an immense trauma. And because of this immense trauma to consciousness, the ego was born. The ego stepped up to basically prevent consciousness from being completely obliterated forever. So it's done an enormous job. It's just that in historical terms, it's relatively new. So it's very infantile. It's like a little, child kicking and screaming. No, I don't want to. But once you discover that it really is just a tiny aspect of the totality of what you are, it's just an amazing thing. The veil pulls away and you can just see the ego for what it really is and absolve it. This, again, it's a destructive process, but it does not come without rewards. In fact, the rewards are immeasurable. Then there's the hyper-over-identification with the roles we play in life, right? So many identify the totality of who they are, right, with the jobs they perform or with the things they do. Now, this is identification with the mask of the persona, and in spiritual terms, it's completely meaningless. You are eternal and infinite consciousness having a human experience. You are not the roles you play, and you are not the thing you think your thoughts with. See, we have these two areas of identification, okay? Some people don't even ever get to identifying with the mechanism they think their thoughts with the ego, because they're stuck in the realm of the persona. I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a teacher, I'm an artist, I'm a musician, I'm a father, I'm a mother, blah, 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 blah. Now, these are the roles that we play in life, but what happens is we over-identify with them. Then you're really lost. These are just roles. Again, in spiritual terms, completely meaningless. Meaningless. That is nothing to do with what you are. And again, stepping away from the control paradigm is an ongoing process. It is a lifelong journey of unlearning and discovery that, of course, begins on the individual level. I know I've probably said that in every single podcast. I'm repeating that point to hammer the point home. You cannot look outside for this. This is something that you initiate. It's something that comes from within. No one else can do it for you, and no one can give you a roadmap. The answers they're already inherent within you, masked and veiled behind a lifetime of conditioning and mind programming. That crucial first step is in realizing that you have in fact been conditioned to view reality in a certain way, the way that the dark occultists want you to see it. And that's something else the ego has a hard time with too. It doesn't want to admit that everything it thinks it knows is a lie. That's a threat to the ego. The ego's worked so hard to build these walls of perception and these walls of belief systems. It does not like it when the idea comes that everything I think I know might be a lie, But that's, again, like I said in the beginning, that's what true intelligence constitutes, the understanding that you've been lied to your whole life. And until one can make that realization and be honest with himself, then the process can begin. But the ego doesn't like that. Well, the ego thinks, well, if I'm wrong about this, I might have been wrong about other things. The ego strives to be right. It wants to be right at the expense of actual understanding. And I've seen this with a lot of people. Their minds are shut so closed, their beliefs are rigid, and nothing, not even the most evidence in the world, can penetrate those carefully constructed walls of belief. But however, the psychological grip is breaking in these times. However, the more the sorcerers tighten their grip of oppression, the more the opportunity arises for individuals to free their minds. And again, no one can initiate the journey for you, and no one can show you the way. This is an individual journey. Of course, you can have mentors and teachers, of course you can, but always realize that the true teacher will never tell you to follow them. A real teacher will always tell you that it is already within you. You must strive to become your own teacher, your own shaman, your own guru. Now, the late Jim Morrison, singer for the band The Doors, summed this up perfectly when he stated, "The most important kind of freedom is to be what you really are. You trade in your reality for a role. You trade in your sense for an act. You give up your ability to feel and in exchange put on a mask. There can't be any large-scale revolution until there's a personal revolution on an individual level. It's got to happen inside first." I couldn't have said it better. Absolutely. The journey begins with you. And again, I'll reiterate this. Of course you can have mentors and teachers. Someone might be able to guide you to the road, but you have to walk it. And you have to initiate that on your own. You have to have that desire to begin with. It comes first from having absolutely no more tolerance for the lies, and in understanding that you have in fact been lied to your whole life. From the moment we begin to learn and develop, the minute we begin to learn and develop this control paradigm encourages us to worship the ego. And earlier when I was quoting Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, when he said that TV is the infiltration of the new satanic religion, absolutely. The dark, hidden persuaders can be considered Satanists. Satanism is misunderstood. It's not what people think it is. But one of the very main tenets of Satanism is basically worship of the ego. Look around at the culture in which we live. We could say, once you study the tenets of Satanism, really it is a satanic society that's been erected around us. And I'm not even saying this from a religious kind of conviction in any way. It's just that these hidden persuaders, that's their religion, whether we like it or not. That's just how it is. It's worship of the ego. Again, I think it's important to understand, really important to grasp, that the ego has a very necessary function. It's just that we're allowing it to call the shots, like a kid trying to tell the rest of the family what's going to be what, instead of the parents who are in the position to do that. It's a bad metaphor, but it'll do for the time being. Morrison was right with that. When he said it starts individually, there cannot be any kind of massive revolution on the outside without first being a revolution on the inside. He was correct with that. Now, detaching from the herd and going within is what will change this world. And until each individual makes the commitment to go within, to recreate oneself, and to stand in the knowledge and the light of what you truly are, nothing in the outer world can or will ever change. There is no more time left to decide what it's going to be. We have reached the crossroads, the fork in the road. Now one path leads to ruin, to a dystopian technotronic nightmare, or to complete extinction. The other road leads to true freedom, abundance, harmony, and human beings existing in the paradise that we were meant to thrive in. Which will it be? Which will it be? You must ask yourself, and you must answer yourself. Only you and you alone can make the decision. If you leave it to the sorcerers to decide for you, what will manifest in your life will be a literal hell. Choose wisely. And please, don't forget to laugh. You know, I've been engaged in this research now for roughly 16 years, and there are times when the energies get so heavy, it could be extremely depressing, and that's why I mentioned earlier it's very important to have that kind of balancing mechanism between the two. It's no good to be too far off on one side, whether in the light polarity or the dark polarity. It really is all about balancing it so that you can keep your sanity and you can keep moving forward. And again, to laugh. Don't forget to laugh every now and then, you know. We take things so damn seriously all the time. And again, our situation here, folks, it has become dire. Just as an example, the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan, which I've mentioned quite a bit, it's been pouring massive amounts of radiation into the Pacific since March 11th, 2011. So for the last 3 years, they've been lying and covering it up. This is the worst nuclear disaster in the history of this planet, and still so few are even aware of it. I won't even eat seafood that comes out of the Pacific anymore because it's so supercharged with radiation, you know, but that's just one example. Our refusal to do this inner work is what is making this these horrors manifest in the outer world. We must come to this understanding in this day and age, folks. If not, the world that your children will inherit, if there is even a world left, will certainly not be a place in which I want to live, because it will be a dystopian prison. You know, our failure to acknowledge the crises that we face is creating the mess we see, and it's allowing evil to just run amok and have a field day. The time has arrived. We cannot leave it to this next generation to mop up the mess. We got to do it. And again, as I've said a million times, I'll say it a million more times, it starts with you. It starts on the individual level, with the individual commitment to initiate this journey, to walk the road to selfhood. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. As always, I appreciate any and all who open their minds and search for the truth. Thanks for listening to Awake in the Age of Revealing. Walk in peace. I'll talk to you soon.